It's April. It's Monday. That means it's finally time for James and I to run through a simulator on Mock Draft Monday.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Make sure you hit that follow button on audio platforms, subscribe on YouTube to get us delivered to your eyes and ears first thing every day, or right when we publish, whatever your preference is. Regardless, we appreciate you making us your first listen. And James, somehow we've made it all the way to the month of April without cracking open the today the mock draft machine over at the Draft Network, or PFF's Draft Simulator, or Pro Football Network gets in the game now, or Fans Speak, or whatever your mock draft simulator of choice is. Somehow we made it. What is it? It's April 3rd as we record this today for Mock Draft Monday. Absolutely wild. This is
It's
the
a
first
beautiful
time in years we've made it anywhere close to this far.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It is, because now we can dive head first, feet first, full body first into it and do all things draft, right? And of course, the Bengals may make a signing here or there and things like that, but it's full steam ahead, full focus on the draft. We don't have to spread things out for 5 months or 6 months. I mean, think about it. There was 2 years ago, there was in a December game at Paul Brown Stadium, prime time, a Penei Sewell sign for the draft. That means that fans were looking forward to the draft that wasn't taking place until the end of April. And, it was only mid-December. So we've come a long way, my friend. And I'm excited now for the next month, essentially, to be all things draft. It's Locked On Bengals draft over the next 4 weeks, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, so here's something that you might not have known, James. Well, you just said it, so clearly you do know. The draft April 28th to April 30th. So obviously that's coming up here in about 4 weeks. We only have this Monday, 2, 3, 4 Mondays. 4 mock draft Mondays. How many did we do last year?
Oh, man.
25?
Yeah. I mean, it was double digits, right? And we would this is the only one that might not be, 7 rounds. Maybe next week we have to already dive into the 7 rounds. We're going to do 3 today, but maybe that's it. And after this week, we'll have to dive in and do at least 5 next week, because we don't have, like I said, much time to spread it out. But that's also, like I said, a beautiful thing. I'm excited for it.
That's where I was going with this. Is like, we need to have our full 7 round. Like, this is what we think the Bengals are going to do, ready to go in 3 weeks. That's incredibly soon. It feels like. Joe and I are just starting to dive into our draft grades. We're focusing on a few positions this year, some offensive lines, some defensive lines, some corner, some tight end, but that's in its fledgling stages too.
No, not quarterback.
Not quarterback this year.
I'm
Maybe
just
wide
naming
receiver if we have time.
I mean, the Bengals are looking at wide receiver. I can confirm that, but
for sure.
But it's just, how much time do you have to get all of them done? I know, I
Right.
get you. But I keep saying beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. The fact that we don't have to talk about Desmond Ridder or any of these guys, Willis or Pickett.
That's right.
That's also a nice thing as well.
That's right. So let's bring in the mock draft simulator here, James.
Boom.
Here we go. We're going to push the start draft button. I'm going to be looking over at my left screen quite a bit today. If you're watching on YouTube, that's why I'm not looking at the camera. And off we go, off to the races. Here goes the mock draft simulator. We're waiting for the Bengals to get on the clock. We'll evaluate our options. We'll talk about our options. We'll make a pick. We'll go through 3 rounds here today. And here we are, James, picking as the Cincinnati Bengals. And this is one of those scenarios that Joe Goodberry actually tweeted about on Sunday morning. The run of 8 picks or so before the Bengals pick sometimes leaves less than optimal options for the Cincinnati Bengals at 31. In this case, Tyler Linderbaum gone at 24, Kenyon Green gone at 27, Zion Johnson goes all the way at 16. So
Yeah.
all those interior linemen that you're hoping for at
Andrew
the tail
Booth,
end of the
12.
first are gone. Andrew Booth,
Yeah.
long gone.
Kyer
So
Elam
looking at
gone.
the positions that the Bengals might be interested, looking at corner, for example, Roger McCreary and Kyler Gordon are the two guys at the top of the
Mhm.
of the Draft Network's board here. Looking at interior defensive line, DeMarvin Leal, Travis Jones, Fidrian Mathis are the guys at the top of the list. On interior offensive line, there's nobody you would even consider at 31.
Mhm.
I think there's a chance actually the Bengals would consider Sean Ryan here just because of some of the connections they made at the draft. But the names here, Dylan Parham, Sean Ryan, Tyler Smith, a tackle, Daniel Falele, probably not in play at 31. What other position should we be looking at? Edge,
Look.
David Ojabo might be an interesting one. And
Mhm.
then safety is where I come in. Guys like Daxton Hill and Jaquan Brisker, James.
Yeah, just because you're obviously controlling this, let's see quarterback, and I'll explain in a second.
Go ahead.
So Pickett, Ritter, Coral, all there. This is where the Bengals are going to trade back. If there was ever a moment, ever an opportunity, one of these teams that didn't get a quarterback that wants that fifth-year option, they can move up. The Bengals. Do I think that they could like McCreary or like some of those corners? Yeah. Do I think that they would love to take one at 31? No. I mean, it's good and bad. The good is there's quarterback options. The bad is you want those quarterbacks to go earlier in the first round to push some of these other players down the board. If that doesn't happen and the quarterbacks are available, then we may be waiting on Thursday night for the Bengals to pick at 31, just for them not to pick at 31. And so whether it's Pickett, Ritter, Coral, I don't think Howell's in the conversation necessarily. I think that these teams that are looking for a quarterback would move up with. So it's Willis. Did anybody else go off the board? Is it just
No,
Malik Willis?
the only quarterback that has been
Th-
drafted in this particular run of the simulators, Malik Willis. And if that happens, that's how you get to this scenario where you're
Yep.
like, all right, let's see what's there at safety, or that kind of thing.
And I don't think it's going to happen, by the way. The idea of one quarterback going in the first 30 picks, it's a quarterback league. Like I would be shocked if that plays out, but you never know. And so now we find ourselves in a quite an interesting dilemma, my friend, because we're not moving back, right? We're gonna take a player here at
We are.
31. So it is a dilemma indeed.
So yeah, so in real life, you're right. I'm if I'm the Bengals in this scenario, it's like, who wants this fifth year option on this quarterback, baby?
Yep, let's move the hell back.
Who wants it? Because you know who might take a quarterback is the team picking next, the Detroit Lions at 32. If they didn't
Mhm.
pick one earlier in the draft, and in this case, they took Kyle Hamilton, second overall. So you want a quarterback? You want to make sure you get your guy, and the Detroit Lions don't. I don't know why I'm saying it. Detroit Lions don't. You better come get this pick.
Detroit.
Treylon Burks being here at wide receiver is
Oh,
also
look at
fascinating to me.
you. Look at you. See, I'm never going to argue with wide receiver.
I don't think
Everybody
that's the
knows me.
direction. I don't think that's the type of wide receiver I would be looking at. Sky Moore also here, maybe an interesting name, but I'm looking squarely at Daxton Hill here. Safety
Uh-huh.
with some ability to play corner, ability to be in the box, ability to move around quite a bit. Jaquan Brisker, also a guy that can move around, play deep, or can play both safety positions essentially. Not as much of a guy that has experience lining up over wide receivers and playing corner as well. And then Lewis Seen is here. But out of those guys, for me, I think Daxton Hill, Jaquan Brisker are the ones I'm looking at the most. And some people watching on YouTube might be wondering, well, what about David Ojabo? And I fully buy in at this point, James, to the idea that the Bengals should probably not pick Ojabo in the first round. And Joe Goodberry convinced me of this because he's a guy coming off that Achilles that he unfortunately suffered at his pro day who was seen as a guy who needed to be on the field to refine his technique. And if he's
Mhm.
missing a full year, he might not develop the way that he needs to develop in the NFL, which is the biggest reason that I'm concerned about Ojabo. But the other Michigan guy here, Daxton Hill, I think is a pretty interesting name. Does anyone else stand out to you, James, that you would be interested in drafting here?
Not really. Like Sky Moore, I like. McCreary, I like, but I also think that they're in that mid second round, high second round range versus where you're at with the Bengals at 31. It is still a first round pick regardless. And so I think their first three options are trade down, trade down, trade down, and find a way to do that. And then if not, I think you're right about Daxton Hill. You know, if I had to pick a player that fits that could help now, because they could use a third safety that could help
Yeah.
now, but also alleviate some of that pressure with the Jesse Bates deal, alleviate some of the pressure. Maybe they don't get an extension, or maybe they take Hill and say, hey, we're not going to extend a Von Bell because we have a guy like that who wouldn't have to be a huge contributor year one, but you'd hope that year two you'd be able to hit the ground running with him, and he could be one of your starting safeties for all 17 games. So that's the one that sticks out to me the most. Ojabo, I don't think that's in the Bengals DNA to take a guy that's already out for an entire year. I know they dealt with injuries and first rounders, and people are saying that. I just don't see that. Obviously, there's a lot of talent there, but overall, Jake, our first mock draft, this would be like the nightmare scenario. Like if you can't trade down, we're not, and all of these quarterbacks are still there. Well, crap, like it's just not ideal.
I don't know that I'm calling it quite a nightmare. Not ideal. I like that. It's not ideal because Daxton Hill is a good player who can contribute. This would be like when the Bengals drafted Jesse Bates. Tail end of the first round, beginning of the second round. This is similar to when they drafted Jesse Bates. It's just that they didn't have a high first round pick to go with it.
Well,
Let's pick Daxton Hill here, and we'll keep things going on Mock Draft Monday. Get into the second round coming up next.
first, I have to tell you about AG1, something I'm taking every single morning because I got to be honest with you, confession. I don't love veggies. I struggle to consume my fair share of vegetables, but AG1 from Athletic Greens is awesome. You just mix one scoop in 8 ounces of water, and you're going to get every single all the nutrients you need, all the vitamins you need, and you can do it really simple. And it's cost effective, and it's something that I've been doing now for the better part of a month, and I've noticed energy boost. You know what else I've noticed? Well, you can't complain to me about not eating my veggies. I'm able to do that as well. And the 5-star reviews, they have over 7,000 of them. They're legit. It is a really, really good product. I've had some people text me about AG1. You need to check it out if you just want to be healthier, if you do struggle to eat veggies like me. So check it out right now. Athletic Greens, they're going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D, 5 free travel packs with your first purchase as well. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NFL network to get AG1 today. Again, athleticgreens.com/NFL network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
We've been tracking the Bengals' market perception, their odds for winning the AFC, for going to the Super Bowl over at BetOnline for since the Super Bowl, really, since right after the Super Bowl. It's been something that's been fascinating to watch and trend. As free agency has happened, it'll change again through the course of the draft and the offseason. And that's all from BetOnline, your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports information. You'll get all of the latest in sporting news, including the Masters coming up, podcasts, reviews for different leagues this season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Head on over to the website today. Use your mobile device if you want. Learn more about the trends in action at BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, James, let's bring our mock draft simulator back into the picture here on YouTube as we dive back into the second round. After Daxton Hill in the first round, let's take a review of what's happened since then as the simulator ran in the background. Treylon Burks, the guy we talked about as a guy that was there a little bit late, goes at 32. Some other notables here going through the second round. Lewis Sign goes a few picks later to the Jets at 35. The other safety we talked about, Jaquan Brisker at 36. The next quarterback, Desmond Ridder, makes it all the way to 37. Then Kenny Pickett at 40. I mean, these guys are going to go in the first round, right?
A lot
I
of
would
them
have
are.
to imagine.
One or
I mean,
two
the
could fall.
quarterbacks.
Yeah, 1 or 2 could fall, but a lot of I mean, I would say at least 3 quarterbacks go if I
Yeah,
had to
that would
guess
be
now.
the betting line is 3.5. Maybe 2.5? I don't know. It's kind of a hard line. It might be 3. It might just be 3.
Yeah, and that's what I
Uh,
would try to set it as. Look at Detroit, man. Detroit, as you say. They
Detroit.
got Ojabo. They keep him in Michigan. They also, they got Burks, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Interesting draft. They still need a quarterback, and they'll have to figure that out at some point. Jalen Petre at 46 to the Minnesota Vikings. Dylan Parham goes at 47, one of the interior offensive linemen we might have had our eye on in the second round if he was there. Logan
Logan
Hall,
Hall.
a guy that if he falls, you're certainly interested in if you're the Bengals, goes 48 to the Bears. Kyler Gordon, the corner, who I think if he's there in the second round would be an interesting option at 50 to Kansas City. Bernard Raymond gets all the way to 53 in this
Mhm.
scenario, James. This is a guy
Yeah.
that, I mean, consistently mocked in the first round, I feel like, for the last month.
Yeah, he has been. But there's like legit concerns, so I could see him falling out, or I could see the Bengals passing on him. We didn't even really talk about him much, and he was there at 31, so not surprised. Not
And
super surprised, I'll say.
one of the craziest things I think is Cam Taylor, Britt, and Alante Taylor going in the second round before the Bengals pick. This at this point, James, let's look at the corners still available. Marcus Jones, he's 5'8". This is the nightmare at corner at this point,
Well
where
well
all these guys, where McCreary, Gordon, Woolen, Alante Taylor, Cam Taylor, Britt, all these guys go before the Bengals pick in the second round. Because, you know, Taylor and Britt are guys that I'm looking at in the third round. And in this
mhm.
case, they're gone before pick 63. So again, this is where it gets to be a little bit scary. You know, come back, Trey Flowers, find a corner out there. Come on down, Steven Nelson, Joe Hayden, and find a way to patch up corner. You know what I mean?
I think they will. I do. I mean, I because they don't wanna pigeonhole themselves into feeling like, "Oh, we do have to take a corner with one of our first couple of picks." And the other thing, maybe they look at Hill. I mean, it's not like Hill couldn't play corner, super athletic, 6 foot, 191, but is he more of an inside? Would you have to play him inside? That's the part of it. But
That's where he's
yeah,
experienced for sure.
yeah. So yeah, certainly not going corner with this pick. That much we know. People are gonna hate that because it's been corner central at 31, but this is how the board can fall. And so yeah, Trey McBride is certainly interesting there, still on the board at 63.
Yeah, I think Trey McBride is certainly something that you consider at 63 if he's available
Hmm.
there. I think that he's not a first round tight end at this point, most likely for a reason. And the tight end classes, there's a few guys, but
Hmm.
if you miss on those guys, and I think it's Trey McBride, Greg Dulcich, and Jelani Woods, and different rounds, obviously. And there's some other guys with upside. I think Jake Ferguson has some upside here from Wisconsin as well. And it's not
They've
just
shown
because he
some
has the
interest in
same.
Isaiah Likely too. People love Ruckert from Ohio State, and people as in like Ohio State fans that are also Bengals fans.
I know there are Bengals fans that are really high on Likely and Ruckert. Likely doesn't fit what the Bengals like to draft, and Ruckert didn't test. And so, and he didn't really have great production. So I think that, in the second round, definitely we're too early on those guys. Looking at interior linemen, the Bengals did meet with Sean Ryan. I think that
Hmm.
there is some serious interest in Sean Ryan. We also know that there's some interest in Jamari Sawyer
Hmm.
from Georgia. There might be some interest in Darian Kennard as well. Looking at tackles real quick, there's nothing here. I mean, Abraham
It
Lucas is
feels
probably
early.
the next guy.
It would feel early for Sawyer to me too at 63. I know it's basically third round, but it still feels a little early.
You might think. I could definitely see the Bengals drafting Sawyer in the second round. That's a thing that seems within the realm of possibility. And then Travis Jones is the other name that's really interesting to me here.
Hmm. Yep.
Especially,
He's someone
go ahead.
that's been mocked to them. I've seen a couple mocks where it was 31, I believe,
Yes.
where he was mocked to him. So if he's there at 63, you need an interior presence anyway on defense. That's the name that jumped out to me the most. And then I saw McBride. Obviously, I'm looking at the screen from a distance, but those are the two I think. If I had to give a board, those are probably the two right now that stand out the most. That's
And
another
I
one
think that
too.
The third one is Nick Bonito, who's just pure
Yep.
pass rushing, pure speed from Oklahoma, edge rusher, and would be kind of like the idea with Osai last year, although Osai isn't a pure pass rusher, but it's just like athletic guy who you can get who's maybe falling a little bit, and they
Mhm.
scooped up Osai in a very similar spot to where we would be drafting. You have to remember, this is like the Bengals drafting last year without a first round pick, is essentially what we're doing here. Right. And so Benito here would be very similar to the Osai pick. But for me, James, I'm kind of tunnel visioned on Travis Jones. I know he's a bit more of a nose in terms of size, but he does provide a little bit of athleticism, a little bit of movement skills, in that he can get after the passer a little bit. And just looking at other guys here on the defensive line, like you're waiting and hoping for Ephidrian Mathis, perhaps. So
Mhm.
that would be the argument toward a tight end. But a tight end, I'm happy seeing, which of these guys can I maybe scoop up next round. So for me,
Mhm.
it's actually between the two defensive linemen. What are you leaning?
No, it's Jones. He popped off from the get-go for me. I was like, "Oh, he's still there at 63?" Like,
Yeah,
I know you said it was a nightmare at corner, but it's certainly not a nightmare to have him still on the board here. So,
right.
it's wild because it's almost like they had like an early second round pick at 31 and then a mid second rounder in Travis Jones, where because I would expect him to be gone in the top 50 almost for sure. But if he's not, then you take him and you feel pretty good about adding two young cornerstones to your defense.
Yeah, and I think it was Mel Kiper who had Travis Jones
That's who it
to the
was. You're right.
Bengals in the first round. So we'll pick
Yep.
Travis Jones. We'll let it run on the show this time. We'll pick Travis Jones and finish up our mock draft Monday coming up next.
But first, a word from Built Bar, the number one protein bar on the planet. You're getting healthier. You have, well, vacations coming up, right? If you're like me, if you're like Jake, if you're trying to get a little healthier, find a midday snack that, well, is going to have a protein punch that's going to taste great. Well, don't look any farther. Go to built.com right now because built bars are the number one protein bar on the planet. High in protein, low in sugar, low in calories, perfect for you. And maybe you are hitting the gym and you need more protein in your diet. Well, Built Bar obviously can help there too. Every single bar covered in 100% chocolate. Check them out right now at built.com and use promo code LOCK15 and you're gonna get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com.
There's apparently people are talking in our Locked On group chat, James, about this coconut or this brownie batter puff.
Oh,
I'm intrigued. All right, let's
yeah.
pick Travis Jones and let the third round run here before we're on the clock with the Cincinnati Bengals in the third round. There goes Sean Ryan right away. There goes Trey McBride pretty quick.
Benito's gone.
Benito Paschal from the edge rusher from UK,
Sawyer
Jemery
gone.
Stallier. Oh, this doesn't seem so bad. We have many choices that I'm happy with here at
Look at
pick
that. The tight end
95.
fell. The tight end fell.
All the tight ends fell. This is
Yep.
this is kind of why I was comfortable waiting and seeing. For me, it's
Well,
Greg
not all
Goldschmidt.
of them. Not all of them.
Not all of them. We mentioned
Yeah.
Trey McBride got picked, and let's
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
look at the tight end position here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it, but I'll tell you the only other tight end picked is Cade Otton from Washington, who I frankly, admittedly, don't know a ton about yet, but he's the other tight end that's been
Yeah.
picked. He has really good production at Washington. I don't think we have testing for him, so that would be a concern. And that's all I know about Cade Otton.
Hey, look, this from a tight end perspective, the board fell to them. What other spots here are available?
I would look at Donovan West here from Arizona State. He's probably only a center at the next level, but again, when you have the versatility that you have in Ted Karras, that allows you to draft a center. Lycidas Smith, whose name I'm probably butchering, is another guy on the interior offensive line that I would probably be interested in at this point. Cade Mays and Cam Jurgens, both guys that the draft network isn't very high on. I could
Mhm.
see probably Jurgens more than Mays being in the conversation at the tail end of day two. Looking at offensive tackle, there's nobody here that really stands out to me at all. for pick 32 or pick 95. Sorry, the end of day 2. Where else would we look? Edge. This seems bizarrely late for Kingsley and Enagbare, whose name I also
Mhm.
probably butchered. I think I've seen him as like a day 1, day 2 fringe kind of guy in a lot of
Mhm.
places.
Yeah.
Where else should we look, James?
Uh, well,
Corner?
let's check the corners. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about this. There's nothing here that's screaming at me. I know UC fans might want Kobe Bryant at this point. I think this is early for him, and this is a scenario where we've truly whiffed. I think at the cornerback position on days 1 and 2.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Kobe Bryant, 4th round. If he's on the board this next pick, and we're only doing 3 rounds today, but that's someone that I would consider. We're clearly not going corner here. To me, let's look at the receivers as well. Because right now I'm leaning tight end, I would say. Alec Pierce still on the board. Now I'm intrigued. I'm interested in my man Alec. You want to talk about a Cincinnati Bearcat? If he's still there right now, oh, that's tempting. It is tempting. And Justin Ross still on the board as well. He could reunite with T. Higgins. So a couple guys there that stand out. Any of the other receivers stand out to you?
At receiver, probably not. I mean, Khalil Shakir, I think, is a toolkit, and you kind of see if it depends on the team if they think that they can get him ready to
Mhm.
contribute in year 1. Alec Pierce being here does complicate things because I'm
It
ready to
does.
pick Greg Dulcich and call it a day, right? Or
Yep.
maybe an interior lineman just to get somebody here, but it's tough. Or Kingsley Enagbare, probably Enagbare. Man,
Yeah, you're
learning
pretty close.
names for the draft is tough. Um, but those 2 stand out to me the most. But it'd be hard to move me off of a tight end here. I think that they need a tight end of the future. Hayden Hurst on a 1-year deal, even if he's good, you could be looking at needing some tight ends in the very near future.
Mhm.
And so Dolchich is the way that I lean here, but maybe you can talk me into Alec Pierce.
Yeah, that's who I'm taking. I'm surprised he's still there, and I don't think he's going to be. I think he's going to go. I don't even know if he'll be on the board at 63 when the Bengals are picking, and maybe he is, right? But I mean, you got a guy who can jump out of the gym that runs extremely well. I think he translates to being a good enough route runner where you could put him in the slot in the NFL, and so man, if you want to get a guy that's got the tools, you said toolkit, man, he's an athlete and he's jump baller, all of those things. I think at 95, I'm feeling pretty good about it. That's who I would probably take here. But it's weird because we've not even weird. We've agreed this whole way and kind of without me talking necessarily, we've kind of seen in line. And I'm between those two, Dolchich and Pierce. I just think Pierce, you see what those wide receivers are getting paid. It's good to have a plethora of wide receivers at that position, especially a jump ball guy like Pierce that I think is going to play pretty well at the next level.
And the way you talk me into Pierce is by saying like, well, what if you can get one of Ferguson or Woods in the
And
next
you
round? And I don't
and
think
you
Woods is going to be there in the 4th round. I don't know if he's even going to be there at the tail end of the 3rd round, the way that his pre-draft process is gone.
mhm.
But you could talk me into, one of these other tight ends
Yep.
potentially, and you could get me to buy that, Alec Pierce is a rarer talent. But, you look at the draft network here, they certainly don't think so. Their predictive board has him going in the 4th round, well into the 4th round, and their player ranking version of the board has him with roughly that grade, an early day 3 grade. So the
I would be
draft network
shocked.
guys here are not impressed as much
I
with
would be
Alec
shocked.
Pierce as some others.
Yeah. I mean, I would be shocked if he's still on the board at 114. I would. I think I think he could be a player. And the beauty of drafting someone like that is you're not going to be banking on him to be a game changer right away, but he's the athlete and like the vertical leap. Well, yeah, he tested well, but it also shows up on the field. And yeah, I think he could be a nice pick there at 95. So that's how I lean. You can go Dolchich if you want, just for simulator purposes, but I would take Pierce here and say, all right, we'll find a tight end next round, because I do think one of these guys, maybe it is Likely, maybe Isaiah Likely. In what world is Isaiah Likely a better prospect than Alec Pierce? That's what I'm curious about.
I think that it's a scarcity thing. There aren't as many tight ends in this draft, and I totally get where you're coming from with Pierce.
Mhm.
I really do, and I wouldn't be mad at Alec Pierce in the 3rd round, but say it is Alec Pierce, and you have a safety, a guy that can maybe play a little bit of 3 tech for you, but is mostly probably a nose kind of player who can, he has versatility on the interior defensive line in Travis Jones, and then a wide receiver. What are the positions we've talked about? I mean, I'm already killing us for not getting a corner somewhere. Maybe this is, the trade back in the 1st round kind of thing. But, you're coming out without a corner, without really bolstering the pass rush. And it's kind of not a great place to be. And I'm wondering, where did Kyer Elam go?
Oh, 18 or
19th. Okay,
19.
there it
Yeah.
is.
He went early. Booth
All
went
these
12th
corners just went
or
early, and
13th.
that's what's tough
Yeah.
about it.
Well, and that's I think that part is realistic, where a lot of
Yeah,
those guys, everyone's saying Booth and Elam, a lot of those guys are probably gone. Maybe all of them are gone.
might
And
be.
so the trade back, here's why the trade back would make sense, right? Is maybe you still are able to get a McCreary. Plus, when you're in this situation, you have an extra pick to take the tight end. And then if Pierce falls, you could still get the receiver you want or insert whoever you want. So um, yeah, it's tough. And it also is just a reminder that they're not going to be able to do everything.
Yeah,
They're not going to be able to do everything in this draft, because you know what I'm concerned about? They still haven't addressed offensive line.
yeah,
I think that matters, not addressing offensive line on the first 2 days and banking on what they have. That's not necessarily an ideal scenario either. And but to me, I lean Pierce. I think the value, the positional value as well, and I think they're okay at tight end. Um,
for
but
this year.
yeah, no doubt, for
But
sure.
they're
And
also okay at wide receiver for this year. In the same way they're okay at tight end, where like you lose a receiver, big step down. You lose Hayden Hurst, big step down in terms of receiving ability.
for sure. And so that's the part of it. That's the balance. I don't think they're going to sign a receiver in free agency. So I think they have
Yeah,
to address it in the draft. I see the scenario where they could address corner, where they could address defensive line, even offensive line in free agency still. So that's
yeah.
another factor.
Let's just pick a guy here. We'll wrap up. I'm gonna grab Dolchich. Here's where James would have taken
Yeah.
Alec
Pierce,
Pierce, and I get
hater.
both arguments for sure. This is not a hater pick. There goes Alec
Yeah. Oh,
Pierce,
and Pierce goes to the Chiefs.
the
Man,
Chiefs.
oh my God. Oh, see you in the AFC title game, Alec.
Yeah, there
Jeez,
you
oh,
go. So
Tyreek who? Tyreek who? That's what I.
the the Chiefs totally rebuilding their wide receiver room. Juju Smith-Schuster, Alec Pierce, et cetera, et cetera. The takeaway here is when you're picking late, boy, is it hard to draft. You can't. You're so much less sure about who's going to be available to you. Where, like I said, it's like the Bengals picking last year without a first round pick,
Mhm.
a little bit earlier, but without a first round pick. And that's the challenge that the Bengals face this year. We were unable to get a corner in the first round, which kind of sets off this cascading effect. And one thing that wouldn't surprise me here, James, is that if this is what shakes out for the offensive line,
Mhm.
where for me, I think the Bengals to pick an offensive lineman, it would have to be pretty overwhelming value. I think that's how they're approaching it. And if they don't get one of these guys that would be a slam dunk pick where they're picking, they're going to be looking for value elsewhere with a BPA approach. And sometimes the BPA approach doesn't necessarily look great, at least for 1 year. But you hope that all these guys can contribute in year one and develop into long term starters. And this, again, reminds me of when they picked Jesse Bates. And it didn't really make a lot of sense to some people. And then he went on and became a really good starter.
Yeah, it's one thing I really want to. It's a reminder that the Bengals might not take a corner in the first round, and to me, I think it's okay. I don't think we get an F because they don't get a corner in the first round. I'm much less sold on the idea of they have to take a corner in the first round than I think most of our listeners, most people out there, and because especially at 31, you can't be that way. It's just
Yeah.
impossible. The idea of Booth or Elam. Well, why wouldn't the Chiefs take either one of those guys with their picks right before at picks 28 or 29 and 30? Right. It's going to be interesting for sure. But no, I think we did okay. You whiffed with Dolchich instead of Pierce, but that's okay. We can all be wrong sometimes.
Everything is a competition for James. There's
Yeah.
no gray. It's black and white and nothing in between.
No, it's black and orange, and it's daily here on Locked On Bengals. That's what it is.
And
That's what it
sometimes
is.
red if you're a
That's what it
Cincinnati
is.
Bearcat like James Rapien. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Let us know how much you hate or love the way we navigated. I think this very difficult draft scenario for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think these are good players, but they're not necessarily the marriage of good player and need the way that things have seemed to have gone for the Bengals lately. We'll be back with plenty of draft content and more as it is April, and that means it is draft season. Until next time, Bengals fans, hoo day and have a good one.